In my video on the worst IndyCar driver of the 21st century, I mentioned one driver almost as unqualified entering IndyCar as Scott Mayer. This driver only had one season racing cars under his belt in the 275 horsepower Barber Dodge series, a far cry from the 800 horsepower Champ cars he'd step into at just 17 years old. His career seemed almost destined for reject status even before it started. But after a rocky start, he would quickly improve and even become a race winner. But as quickly as he became one of Champ Car's rising stars, he'd find himself out of a ride with his career fading into obscurity. Let's take a deep dive into the career of Nelson Philippe. Nelson grew up the son of a successful French businessman. He wasn't spectacular in karting, winning no championships in the highly competitive Italian scene, but he did have some success. His biggest win was in the USA in the 2002 Rock Island Grand Prix, a race attracting many of the top karters in North America. For 2003, the 16-year-old would move to the Barber Dodge Pro Series, a feeder to the kart series at the time, and a natural first step into Formula Car racing after karting. Although the series produced a lot of talent, such as A.J. Allmendinger just a few years prior, in 2003 the series wasn't as competitive, probably in part due to kart's financial troubles. 2003 series champion Leonardo Maia would move up to Indy Lights and Atlantics for the next few years, but wouldn't accomplish much there. Nelson Philippe would find himself finishing the year 9th in the championship, with just one podium finish at Vancouver. This was not a particularly impressive feat. In fact, he only beat one other driver in the championship that ran all the rounds, that driver being Justal Unser III. To talk about the next step in Nelson Philippe's career, let's go back in time to set the stage. Before the 2002 season, Penske left kart for the rival Indy Racing League, and before the 2003 season, not only would two more major teams leave for the IRL in Andretti Green and Ganassi, but two of the three engine manufacturers, Honda and Toyota, would move as well. CART, a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange, was now in major trouble, on the verge of bankruptcy. A group of three team owners, Paul Gentilozzi, Kevin Kalkoven, and Gerald Forsyth, would successfully form a new group to buy the series, winning in court over another bid to buy the series by Tony George, and thus extending the split era in American open-wheel racing. However, the new owners weren't in the clear yet. Many races on the schedule were contractually required to have 18 cars on the grid, and at the season premiere event at Long Beach, just 1 month before the start of the season, there were still only 12 confirmed drivers. In short, the series was desperate for anyone who could bring some money to fill some seats, and Nelson Philippe was one of those opportunistic drivers. Nelson would sign with Rocket Sports, Paul Gentilozzi's team, as a teammate to veteran Alex Tagliani. At just 17 years old, he would become the youngest driver ever to start a Champ Car race, a feat that I believe he still holds to this day. So, how did Nelson do in his first season? In his first 5 races with Rocket Sports, Philippe's best qualifying effort was 16th out of 18 cars. Although he managed 2 top 10s in his first 5 races, he was usually the last car running, several laps down, so while top 10s for a rookie would be an impressive feat in today's IndyCar series, it wasn't saying much in the short 18-car field. After 5 races, he would be dropped from Rocket Sports for contractual issues. On the surface, this looks really bad, poor performance leading to getting fired by the team. But a 2020 article interviewing Guy Smith, driver for Rocket Sports in 2005, shed some light on the situation. The second car at Rocket Sports was apparently just a field filler to keep 18 cars on the grid, with a hodgepodge crew consisting of no dedicated race engineer and leftover parts. Gentilozzi was probably broke from buying the series and unable to put anything into his team. Indeed, Guy Smith and all other drivers who drove the car from 2004 to 2005 appeared to underperform their potential. The car was so bad in 2005 for Ryan Hunter-Reay, who was already a race winner in the series and would later go on to be IndyCar champion in 2010, that According to the article, he threatened to sue Paul Gentilozzi. After missing 3 races, Philippe would be back, taking his money to Conquest and partnering with Justin Wilson. Although his results weren't much improved, his pace was. He qualified within half a second of Wilson, the former Formula One driver, in all but 1 race, even out-qualifying Wilson at the Las Vegas Oval. While half a second off the pace isn't that impressive, considering Philippe's lack of experience, I'd say this was already exceeding my expectations. For 2005, Philippe would return to Conquest, this time partnering with Canadian rookie Andrew Ranger. The young pair were almost the same age, but Ranger brought a much more impressive karting and junior Formula record as Canadian Formula A karting champion and North American Fran-Am champion. Philippe's results were again not particularly impressive. He finished 13th in the championship compared to 10th for Ranger, but Philippe out-qualified Ranger 10 of 13 times, including all of the last 4 races of the year. Philippe would be voted most improved driver by his peers. 2006 would be a breakout year. Switching to CTE HVM racing, Philippe's year would immediately start better with a 4th at Houston and 3rd at Milwaukee, well outperforming his career best race finish of 7th set in 2005. His season would then have some ups and downs until the highlight of his career at the penultimate round at Surfers Paradise. Philippe would have his best qualifying effort of his career starting 5th. After a few frontrunners had problems in the first half of the race, he'd quickly find himself in the catbird seat. But the final laps would see a hard-charging Mario Dominguez with more push to pass breathing down Nelson's neck. Nelson would have great pace, holding off and pulling away from Dominguez, earning a well-deserved first win. At the end of the season, perhaps most miraculously, he'd finish 4th in the points, ahead of veterans like Paul Tracy and Bruno Junqueira, and future IndyCar champion Will Power, who was in his rookie year. So, what would 2007 hold for the now veteran Philippe with 3 years of experience and a race win under his belt? Would he return to the CTE HVM team, now rebranded for the 4th year in a row to Minority Team USA, and continue to rack up a few more wins? Or would he take his money to Forsyth and become a championship contender? Both seemed very possible, but neither would happen. Instead, Philippe would be out of a ride in 2007. After finally finding success, this was almost as shocking to me as him being given his ride in the first place in 2004. Apparently, Philippe either ran out of funding or his family was unwilling to keep funding his ride out of pocket after proving himself in 2006. The harsh reality was there was no space in Champ Car for a somewhat promising driver without money. Just like how Philippe displaced a deserving driver in 2004, he'd be displaced by another ride buyer for 2007. This was just the protocol in the Champ Car days. While today, a young driver will likely need to bring money to get a shot at IndyCar, they at least have the opportunity to stay if they find success. This wasn't the case in Champ Car back then, when, minus a few funded rides by the series owners, the rest of the cars were basically just field fillers, and it really shows with the revolving door of drivers from 2003 to 2007. Nelson would come back to make a few starts at the end of the 2007 Champ Car season and make a few starts in GP2 and Super League Formula in 2008. For 2009, we'd finally get a chance to see Philippe back post-Champ Car IRL merger, with the former Hummer driver now pushing an iDrive Green initiative to raise money for his seat. He'd race Indy for the first time, narrowly qualifying on bump day for his former team, now just called HVM Racing again. We'd look forward to finally getting a chance to see what Philippe could do in the IndyCar series on a road course at Sonoma. But unfortunately, the weekend and ultimately Nelson Philippe's career would end prematurely. Philippe would have an innocent spin exiting turn 3, but due to the blind nature of the corner and Nelson's car coming to a stop at just the wrong spot, Nelson would be T-boned by Will Power at full speed seconds later. Ironically, Nelson and Will were both former Champ Car race-winning drivers, racing part-time and trying to find their place in IndyCar. Both would suffer injuries in the crash and miss the race. While Power would bounce back and continue a long career to this day, Philippe's career would stop in its tracks. We'd never see Nelson Philippe return to IndyCar or any professional race to date. Reportedly, the crash either spooked him or made him lose interest. Nelson would instead get involved in his family's business, apparently making expensive-looking skincare machines, where he appears to continue to work to this day. So, how good was Nelson Philippe, and how would he do in modern IndyCar? Here's my honest take. He proved he was way better than just a no-talent ride buyer. His success in Champ Car surprised me and opened my eyes to the blurred lines between ride buyer and talented driver. They aren't mutually exclusive like some fans make it out to be. But, looking back on his successful 2006 season, I'd say it was an opportunistic one. He wasn't a great qualifier, and in many of his solid finishes, he ran mid-pack and had average pace before moving up after crashes or misfortunes of others, or by some luck with pit strategy. Overall, I wouldn't have bet on Philippe having a long and successful career in IndyCar even if he had found a way to stay in the series. But that's not to say he wouldn't have proven me and other naysayers who were skeptical of the 17-year-old even being able to keep a Champ Car between the walls of the Long Beach street circuit wrong again. At the time of this video, Philippe is still only 36 years old, younger than 6 active full-time 2022 IndyCar racers: Jimmy Johnson, Helio Castroneves, Takuma Sato, Scott Dixon, Simone Pagenaud, and Will Power, so perhaps he's still young enough to make a comeback. That wraps up this video. Let me know what you think of Nelson Philippe in the comments, and let me know what driver you want me to profile next, whether a reject or not a reject, and I'll see you in the next video.